Alright, today's topic is about solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So, in the past couple lessons, in the last lesson we talked about solving quadratic equations by completing the square, in which we were basically taking our quadratic and we were factoring it out that way. In this case, we're going to use a specific formula, which I'm sure you have all heard in some way or form, and that is a quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so that is our quadratic formula, and that's what we're going to be using today. So it's the same thing as the formula. All right, you take the numbers you're given, you plug them into the letters, and you solve it. Okay. And that's the same kind of process each time. There's nothing that's super complicated. I mean, it may be a little tricky here and there, but it's something to get super worked up about. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to write this smaller in the corner so we can reference it, and then we'll start with our first example. So make sure you have this written down somewhere. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so we're going to box that up there. Okay. So if you remember, our equation in standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c, right? So when we get every equation, if we have a number in front of the x squared, that's our a. Our middle term numbers are b, and the last term is our c. All right, and then we're going to plug whatever numbers here into where they go, the b's, a's, and c's over here. Okay. Alright, so our first example is x squared plus 19x minus 7 equals 0. Okay, so let's plug this into our formula. So if you look, we have negative b, so negative b, and our b is our middle term, so negative 19. Now the x doesn't do anything. X's aren't involved in this, okay? It's just the numbers in front of the letters here, okay? So don't bring the x into it, just bring the number into it. So negative 19 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that would be 19 squared, minus 4ac, so 4 times a, and a, if x squared is by itself, our a in here is a 1, and then c, which is negative 7. Don't forget that negative there, alright? So negative 7 over 2 times a, which again is 1. Alright. So now let's go ahead and solve this. We're going to have our handy calculator here to help us out. So we have negative 19 plus or minus. Now 19 squared, we're going to do 19 squared, which is 361, minus 4 times 1 times negative 7. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do 4 times 1 times negative 7, and that equals negative 28. So it's minus negative 28, okay, over 2 times 1, which is 2, of course. So now let's solve inside our square root. I'm going to have to erase some of this in a second here. So negative 19 plus minus 361 minus negative 28 equals 389. Okay. Now here, what we can go ahead and do is, you see here in the middle we have a plus minus, okay? So what this means is kind of like what we did with completing the square in the last lesson, in which you would do negative 19 plus the square root of 389 divided by 2, and then negative 19 minus the square root of 389 divided by 2. So in this case, we are going to figure this out. We are going to get lots of decimals when you do this, okay? So don't get super weirded out about that. You're going to get decimals. That's what it is. It's going to be okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this so far, so I can go ahead and write this out. So we have negative 19 plus and negative 19 minus. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that. So negative 19 plus 389, we're taking the square root of that, equals this, divided by 2, and we get 0.36. Okay, so we can go ahead and round that. So 0.36, and then we're going to do the other one. Negative 19 minus 389 square root equals, and that's important when you do if you use this calculator, after you do the square root of something, you have to hit the equals button to get to your answer, and then divided by 2, and we get negative 19.36. So those are our answers, okay? So yes, you're going to get decimals, yes, you're going to work with weird numbers and everything, but it's the same process, right? You just plug in the numbers in the formula and solve in the formula, okay? It's the same thing each time, all right? So that's how we find this. That's our answers for our first question here, okay? So let's go ahead and do another example. Let's go ahead and do x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. Okay. So in this case, we have our formula. So we have negative b, and our b in this case is a negative 4. Now once again, your minus out front of the 4 makes this a negative. But this negative out front is still here. So it's negative b. So, and b is negative 4. So negative 4. Okay, we'll fix that in a second. All over b squared. So b is negative 4 squared minus 4 times a. And remember, a, if there's no letter in front of the x squared, our a is a 1. And c, which is once again negative 7. All over 2 times a, just 2 times 1. Okay? So in front here, negative 4, those two negatives cancel out to make a positive 4. Okay. Negative 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 times negative 7, and that's like our last question gives us negative 28 all over 2. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do 16 minus 28 negative equals 44 all over 2. And once again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do 4 plus. So I'm going to erase this again to show you. Make sure you have this written down. So we're going to do 4 plus the square root of 44 over 2, and 4 minus the square root of 44 over 2. So 4 plus 44 square root equals, divided by 2 equals 5.3. And we'll round 5.32. And then 4 minus the square root of 44 equals, and then divide by 2, and that equals negative 1.32. Okay. So like I said, it's not hard. It's not complicated. All right. You just have to know the formula, which is right here. Plug in. What do you do? And I think the important part here in this case is your negatives. Okay. You need to watch the negatives. Okay. If it's a minus in front of the numbers here in your initial equation, that makes this number a negative. So you need to bring that minus with that number whenever you plug it in. Okay. If it's negative 4 here, it has to be negative 4 in your B's here. If it's negative 7 here, it has to be negative 7 in your C here. Okay. It's all that negative comes with it. So don't forget that negative. All right. All right. Let's do one more. This is pretty complicated, and then we have one more thing to talk about. Let's do negative 2x squared plus 12x minus 5 equals 0. Okay? So once again, our formula, so negative b, our b in this case is 12, plus minus b squared, so 12 squared, minus 4 times a. In this case, our a is a negative 2, and our c is a negative 5, all over 2 times our a, which is negative 2. So a little change from the previous questions. So negative 12 plus minus, so 12 squared. 12 squared is 144. Minus, now we have 4 times negative 2 times negative 5 equals 40. So 144 minus 40, all over 2 times negative 2, which is a negative 4. Now we're going to do negative 12 plus minus 144 minus 40 is 104 divided by negative 4. Now we're going to go ahead and solve this, our plus and minus here. So negative 12 plus the square root of 104 over negative 4, and negative 12 minus the square root of 104 over negative 4. So negative 12 plus 104 square root equals, and then divide that by negative 4, that equals 0.45, so 0.45, and then negative 12 minus 104 square root equals, divided by negative 4 equals 5.55. Those are our two answers, okay? So as I said, follow the formula, plug it in the calculator, make sure your negatives are correct, and be alright. Now we have one more thing I want to talk about real quick that it's going to ask you for, and that is finding the discriminant, okay? The discriminant, okay? Now the discriminant, what this means is that it's going to ask you to find the discriminant. So the discriminant is, what you're doing is you're taking from your quadratic formula the part that's underneath the square root here, the b squared minus 4ac. This is your discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so that's when it says find the discriminant, you're going to plug your numbers in from here only into the part underneath the square root, and there's no square root. Okay, it's just the part that's underneath it. All right, and what this tells us is this tells us how many roots there are. Okay, and so and how many solutions, how many real roots there are. Okay, so here's how this works out. When you solve this, okay, if x is greater than 0, is there anything bigger than 0? Okay, then there's two solutions. Okay, if x equals 0, like if it equals 0, then there's one solution. And if x is less than 0, so any negative numbers we have here, there are no solutions. Okay, so we'll keep this in mind here when we solve. Okay, so let's go ahead and give an example here. Let's do 2x squared minus 6x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so remember, we're only taking this part here, our b squared minus 4ac. Alright, so our b is negative 6, so negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 3. Okay, so there's no square root involved, it's just whatever's underneath the square root. Okay, so negative 6 squared is 36, and then 4 times 2 times 3, so 4 times 2 times 3 equals 24. So minus 24, and 36 minus 24 is 12. Okay, So we have our answer is 12. We look over here. It's greater than 0, so this has 2 solutions. Okay. So when you get a question like this, it's going to ask you to find to solve for x, and then tell how many solutions there are. Okay. So that's what you're going to do. Plug it into your b squared minus 4ac, solve for it. Tell me how many solutions there are. Okay. Let's do 5x squared minus 20x plus 20 equals 0. Okay, so we got b squared, or b is negative 20 squared minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is 20. So negative 20 squared is 400. Minus 4 times 5 times 20 equals 400. And 400 minus 400 equals 0. So our answer is 0, which means it equals 0, which means we have one solution in this equation. Okay. So if you were to graph this on a graph, your parabola would only cross the x on the x-axis at 0. Okay, that's what that means. But don't worry about that yet. All right, last one. Let's do 9x squared plus 5x minus 2 equals negative 4. So in this case, we have to make this last one equal to 0. So let's go ahead and add this to this side, okay? And negative 2 plus 4 is 2. Okay. Let's go ahead and plug this in. Our b is 5, so 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 9, times c, which is 2. So 5 squared is 25 minus 4 times 9 times 2 equals 72. So 25 minus 72, and that's going to give us 25 minus 72, negative 47. So negative 47 is what x equals. It's less than 0 because it's a negative number, which means this has no solutions. Okay. So that's solving with discriminant. That's solving quadratic formula. Follow the formulas, plug in your numbers, and be okay.